Carlos Correa signed with a third team this offseason, and Trevor Story is out 4 to 6 months. Let's discuss on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5. Today is Wednesday, January 11th. I am Frank Sanford, joined by Scott White. Let's talk about Carlos Correa, who initially signed with the Giants and then the Mets, and now he's headed back to the Twins on a 6-year, $200 million deal. Scott, we have a good idea of what Carlos Correa looks like in a Twins uniform. He was fine last year, but I do think maybe this is a downgrade from what we thought joining the Mets lineup, and obviously if he had third base eligibility, which he won't have now that he's playing for the Twins.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets news was exciting for fantasy purposes because he would be picking up eligibility at the weaker third base position, and he would be in a very prolific lineup that was going to maximize his run at RBI totals. And that was really the problem for the Twins last year, with the Twins last year. He had only 64 RBI. He had only 70 runs scored. Granted, he didn't play 150 games, but he played 136. So it was clear that those RBI and run totals dragged down his production. So I had moved Correa up ahead of like Xander Bogaerts. If you're talking third base, I moved him ahead of Gunnar Henderson and Alex Bregman. When word broke of him going to the Mets, now that he's not going to be in the Mets, he's going to be back with the Twins. He's back behind all those guys for me. I do think the odds are better than not that if Correa has a healthy season, he'll be able to exceed that combined run and RBI total of 134. It was kind of a fluky thing, even acknowledging the Twins lineup isn't as good as the Mets. But he's back to being decidedly mid-tier among the shortstops, acknowledging, of course, that's a very deep position.
All right, let's move over to an unfortunate injury. Trevor Story underwent an internal bracing procedure on the UCL in his right elbow and is going to miss a decent amount of time. 4 to 6 months is the timetable. Again, that's a pretty wide range. It could be from May through July. Chaim Bloom even said the Red Sox, quote, can't bank on Story playing here in 2023. Scott, this is terrible news, obviously, for multiple reasons, but specifically for second base. It was already not a great position for fantasy, and we lose someone who is being drafted as the 5th second baseman off the board. So how far have you lowered Trevor Story in your rankings? What's a reasonable time to target him in a draft?
Well, he's still top 20 at second base for me. But yeah, he's going to be out a while. I think it'll be mid-season. I don't think Chaim Bloom's comment of, we can't bank on him returning this year. Well, no. I mean, I drive a 17-year-old Mazda. I can't bank on it lasting all of this year, meaning I need to have cash in reserve in case it clunks out on me. But it probably won't. And so I think that's how Bloom was commenting on Trevor Story's timeline. They don't really know, but based on precedent for this injury and the recovery time, 4 to 6 months is what we've is a number of people have offered, and that would put Trevor Story coming back June, July, something like that. Similar timetable to Bryce Harper, who's going to be coming back from full-blown Tommy John. I have Bryce Harper in the 115, 120 range, and I have Trevor Story about 100 spots behind that, because obviously he's no Bryce Harper. But we were counting on him being one of the few impact bats at the second base position, and now there are even fewer of those. It's basically Jose Altuve, Marcus Semien, Ozzie Albies. I'm going to put Jazz Chisholm there, even though obviously he has had some major durability concerns so far in his major league career. At least has that kind of upside. But after that, it gets pretty ugly. Tommy Edmonds there. Andres Jimenez had a good year. Max Muncy. I'd be okay with any of those. And then you're really rolling the dice on like a bounce back season from Ketel Marte or Brandon Lau.
Yeah. So it's a rough position, and unfortunately a rough injury here for Trevor Story. We did have a few veteran signings, Scott. Brandon Belt, a 1-year deal with the Blue Jays. Johnny Cueto, a 1-year deal with the Marlins. And I think more than anything, Scott, it's probably what this does for the value around them, players around them. So for the Blue Jays, I think we see Alejandro Kirk and Danny Jansen see a few less plate appearances this season as a result of Brandon Belt playing DH there. And then for the Marlins, two of Trevor Rogers, Edward Cabrera, and Braxton Garrett are probably going to be out of the rotation.
Well, Brandon Belt tends to get hurt a lot, and he hit only .213 in 78 games last year. So I would think Brandon Belt needs to actually perform. He's turning 35 this year, and he actually needs to perform to take those at-bats away from Kirk and Jansen, who obviously both performed well at the plate last year, Kirk especially. I just don't think he's going to be that impactful of a fantasy player anymore. And I'm not downgrading Kirk or Jansen in light of this news. Yeah, the Cueto situation is tricky. Obviously he was useful at times in fantasy last year unexpectedly, and if he exceeds expectations again, there will be times where we're recommending him as a streaming option. But I think more he's just a veteran innings eater for a team with a lot of young arms with durability concerns. But if we're penciling him in the rotation for next year, that means 2 of Edward Cabrera, Trevor Rogers, and Braxton Garrett are out of the rotation. Obviously, maybe somebody gets hurt early, opens the door to the point that none of them are left out. But it makes it harder to approach those guys who would be of some interest in fantasy in a way that Johnny Cueto is not.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. We'll be back again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.